for the California Marching Band Championships, and I'm here with Ryan H. Turner. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you very much. Tell us, you've been up on the roof today. What are you judging today?
I'm judging visual performance today, so I'm looking at the technical aspects of the shows out there, looking at the technique, the timing of events, and the excellence that's being put out on the field by our performers.
That's awesome. So that's always interesting for me because I used to work with the Academy Drum and Bugle Corps, and I helped out with Phantom for a little bit when J.D. Shaw was writing for them. And I used to stand we'd do a show, and I'd stand next to the guard captain or like the visual caption head, and they're like, "Man, what did you think of the show?" And I was like, "Man, they sounded so good." They're like, "Yeah, but what did it look like?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm still exactly the same. Like, I watched all these bands today, and I saw the recaps, and I was like, all I looked at was the music scores, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I totally agree with that." And then everything else, I was like, "Oh, I didn't even notice actually." I just like that kind of person. So, like when you worked as a music educator. Okay. All right. So when how do you for me, it's like just pure musician. How do you sort of teach students to sort of get this ability to sort of fuse the two together, where they take all the techniques from the visual side and everything they learn in the band room, and then put it out in the field and try to put it together?
I think that's a great question, and I could probably talk an hour about that. But from my standpoint, being a teacher and an instructor and a consultant, it's a process that you have to start with some kind of groundwork or some baseline of something, and then you build on that, and you continue to build out. And I think that's where the fusing comes from. I think too often some of the younger instructors and directors will throw everything at a student at the same time, and it becomes overwhelming. So instead of stepping back and really being very systematic with their rehearsal technique and making sure that they only take care of the visual aspects, and then maybe add on a section playing at one time, or just the drum line, or maybe them just singing their parts rather than actually worrying about the positions and the fingerings and everything, so that the kids can start processing stuff, become successful with the visual aspect, and then they can add music. The reverse is true too for the band directors that may go, "Wait a minute, music's the most important thing." I totally agree, the music is the most important thing, but maybe they should step back and really think about just the music and don't worry about the visual. That kind of segmentation, I guess, and focus of the rehearsal until you get to that time within the rehearsal season where then all of a sudden they start to fuse a little bit on their own. You start to see that the light bulbs coming on in the student's head. Then you can start doing more and more and more. That's where the fusion comes from. And I totally agree with you, by the way, of turning off part of your brain, because the music part of me wants to talk about the music, even though the visual, I'm talking about technique, and if the feet are rolling, and if the forms look good. But inside, my brain's going, "Man, did you hear that?" And I want to say it, and sometimes I'll get on and I'll say something, "That was great music." "Oh, sorry, I stepped out of my caption," Right. But that's fun. I mean, that's, the band directors want to know that, the visual guy, he heard it. It's kind of cool.
Well, music is connection, so I think it's awesome when it emotion just takes over, yeah, and all objectivity goes out the door. You're like, "Oh, that was so great!"
That's right.
I love that. I used to love hearing that on tapes when I would work with a variety of groups. So we start off. My kids are in junior high now, and they are in a great junior high band program, and they were in beginning band before that, and they're getting, my daughter's an 8th grader, so next year's 9th grade, and maybe marching band, maybe not, and so on and so forth. And I went to an all-boys Catholic military high school. I know, it's as awful as it sounds, right? You're exactly right. We didn't really have a marching band. We didn't have a marching band. We stood in a block every now and then for a military thing, but mostly we were a concert band inside. So, and I was well past an age-out year before I even knew what DCI was. Right. So the whole marching thing was completely only for me, only in the military, only to be in a block. So anyway, back to my point, which is, we work really hard with musicians at the beginning to get them to practice, and then we take them to marching band, and we go to marching band camp, and what I don't see is I have a couple of students that are in a local band program that are my neighbors. I hear them in their living room all the time practicing their marching band music, but I never see them in their driveway or their backyard practicing their marching technique. Right. And they really need to do both, right?
Sure do. And one of the things that I talk about with on my recording sometimes, when I see a band that obviously is struggling with some kind of basic marching aspect, I'll direct my comments directly to the director or the instructional staff, and I'll say, is a basics program a part of your rehearsal schedule? Because I think that the visual program deserves the same attention that the musician or the music side of your program does with lip slurs and scales and chordal progressions and tuning and all that. Same thing applies to the basics on the visual side. The kid should have the resources to be able to say, you know, I do understand the fact that I need to stretch my feet out, or I need to do whatever the technique is that the program that I'm with is putting forth. So that kind of attention, I think, needs to be given. And certainly, there's no reason why a kid couldn't be going up and down their street, marching and practicing just simple things. Yeah. Of course, it'll look like a dork, but I, as a drum major of 4 different organizations, spent a lot of time in the front of my house with a mace, or military, the drum major baton, if you will, twirling and spinning, to the point of where I had police officers sometimes stop by and say, "Hey, kid, what are you doing? What is that? Is that a weapon?" And it's not. And I'd show them what I was doing. And, "Oh, hey, you're cool. Go about your business." But that was the kind of dedication that I had. But I was the king band nerd of the world. But there's nothing wrong with that. And I think if you're going to be a marching musician, that's part athlete, part musician. You got to practice the athlete part.
Oh yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. We have I'm a part of the band camp, really, staff at Arizona State University, and with Jim Hudson and this great, huge, gigantic marching program. And we spend, especially in band camp, and then throughout the course of the season, Monday's Music Monday, Wednesdays is the marching day, and there's always a segment in each one of those that's about the basics.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single time, and that's one of those things that's new to high school students, because they come from junior high. It's been learn the first 5 notes, learn an octave, learn your 12 scales, right? Exactly. Get into the stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, left foot first, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. It's like learning all over
That's
again,
right, exactly right. Yep.
So, and I think that the message that I definitely going to have for my kids if they decide to join marching band is like, listen, you have to kind of adjust for the fact that you're in your 5th year or 4th year of band, but you're in your first day of marching. And so it's time to go back and kind of learn the first 5 notes of marching technique.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You got to start somewhere. Couldn't agree with you more.
That's awesome. So okay, so when let's put it the shoe on the other foot or the other hand for a second. So you can get anything you want, and from a band, and you could ask them to do anything you want. From what you're judging today, this visual performance, right?
Yes.
Side of things. So, what's the benchmark?
The benchmark to me is a band that comes out and totally is invested, and I'm talking about the kids, totally invested in the program. You can see that they're not only performing at the top of their game with great technique and great technical prowess, but you can tell that they're thinking. I love that when I see like a form is out of whack and then a kid corrects it, or they made a little error and then they get back into something, or they maybe got a little bit out of phase and then they get back into phase. And I can see that thinking, and that's my job as a judge, is to recognize that and reward it, or at least recognize it for the.
So it's time for you to go back and judge. Ryan H. Turner, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. What a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.